Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. As you can tell, my voice is doing a good bit better from last week, though still a little bit gonna, triggered a little bit easy. So we cut down on some of the videos this week just to make sure my voice was rested, because over this last weekend I've been participating in a very fun event. Echo, a guild from WoW, decided to dip their toes into raiding in Final Fantasy XIV, a 3-day endeavor through Eden's Gate to see just how far they could get, and I was on the caster desk for 3 sessions out of those 3 days, about 9 hours total, and it was a great time amongst other Final Fantasy talent, and of course some casting talent from World of Warcraft. We had a fantastic show, and I'm glad that I had my voice for it, because otherwise it would have been a much tougher show to get through. But it was such a blast. I'll be maybe, I don't know, it's just if you check my socials, you can find them like retweeting clips and stuff like that that came from the event itself. Probably won't share anything on my channel since that's all Echo related stuff, but it was an absolute blast. I hope to do more of it in the future. Other than that, I think we just want to get into the Q&A. I've actually got raiding a little bit, and I don't know if you can see it on my face, but I'm exhausted. So I say that we get to that. So thank you to the sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. I did get some messages about some sponsor names being missing from the list below the stream. To be frank, your name's supposed to be on the screen as well. And I think I said stream there, but it's whatever. Under the video, you know what I meant. But thank you to all of the people over there. There's no real reason to support over there. The people who are doing it are just doing it because they want to. But we appreciate them all the same. And thank you to our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, and Kurenai Oni, who have gone above and beyond. We appreciate them. Appreciate all of our patrons and all of you for tuning in. All of our content's still free here on the channel, no matter what. So as long as you're enjoying it, that's what matters most. Anyway, let's get to the questions. Question number 1, just 8 hours ago too, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Ayo, Haps, hope you are doing well. Hope the same for you as well. Any ideas on how they will handle materia with the stat squish and removal of the belt stats? I wonder if they will perhaps add additional materia slots to gear. Also, I think there will be a new level of materia or keep the current ones. So odds are the only significant change we're going to see to materia is the addition of 2 new tiers of materia, as they have done the last several expansions, and actually adjust the values on all levels of materia. Now, during the combat live letter, I was hoping to hear that perhaps they would fix the way that materia is done. I think it's kind of a poor system that we have these odd numbered materias that can be melded until, the 5 slots for the overmelding, or, just melded normally. And then you just have these ones that can be melded in the guaranteed slots, and then 1 bonus slot with the forbidden melding being the thing that you do with the remaining. It's just weird to have like these constantly ascending tiers that don't serve the same purpose. It would make more sense to split them into 2 different tiers and then to rework the way that early game material actually operates, and maybe make it a little bit more attractive of an option for people to do at those early levels. Obviously not make it mandatory, but encourage it, educate it a little bit more than a low level quest that you grab over in Central Thanalan. So if anything, I don't think they're doing enough with materia. I think there's a lot of room to improve the game's clarity on that system, but at the end of the day, we'll get 2 new tiers of materia as it seems right now, and they probably won't be expanding the number of slots that are available on any gear. The removal of the belt doesn't really matter for that, because the whole game's going to be balanced around the removal of the belt. So there's nothing to make up for stat-wise with not having the belt anymore. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hello, Haps. Hello, indeed. Was very excited to see tank gap closers get some extra range. Yeah, not even a change I had really thought about. I've always just kind of played around whatever range I have, but I see definitely why they did what they did. Do you think they'll make the level you get from them universal, like we got with the tank stances in Shadowbringers? Quite frankly, they should. I think gap closers for tanks in particular should be something that's available at early levels. This should be something that's right along there with their ranged attack that they get at level 15. I was saying even to make it something as low as level 20 and universal across. Yes, if you want to add charges to it at the higher levels, I think that's perfectly reasonable. But with them removing the gauge requirement from the gap closer for warrior and then adding stacks to the various ones, it just for me doesn't make any sense anymore to have them separated. They are already for the most part homogenized, so might as well go the whole way, make them available early so you don't feel like you're being griefed, and give the tanks that little bit of extra movement, especially in the early dungeons, to allow them to generate a bit more agency over the other players, really look like they're setting the pace, but maybe that would make some low-level players a little too reckless dashing into every group of enemies. Alright, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hope you're doing alright. Hope the same for you. Question for you that I feel that answer will be a no from you. Since Age can heal as it does damage, what do you think the chances are that the healing procs Divine Veil? It's already finicky enough that regens and abilities don't proc it, so I'm a bit pessimistic about it, even though Paladin is the poster boy. Well, there are some pros and some cons to this, and what I can tell you is I'll try to get an answer, at the very least. I would assume no, but that's only because I think in some ways it's a little more reckless. Generally, when a paladin pops Divine Veil, you are going to be proccing it almost immediately. It's not always the case. Sometimes for the sake of timing in an encounter, you want to let that initial duration kind of tick for maybe just a few seconds, but generally speaking, that's what the goal is going to be. So while I could say, yeah, it makes perfect sense to be able to do it, it also could potentially proc a Veil too early, but that's going to actually be on the Paladin overall and their actual usage of the skill. So I think it's a reasonable ask, and it's a reasonable thing to wonder about. So do I think they'll allow it? I don't see why not, but it's a question of, does it interact that way? And with that, I'll try to find an answer. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hope you're doing well. Really enjoyed your videos. Welcome. Thank you. And first time asking a question, so let's get to it. Summoner Main here, who's been playing Final Fantasy XIV for a year and a half. Like most people, I was excited to see the Summoner rework shown in the job action trailer, especially the visual spectacle. However, as I played with essentially one rotation, which I have muscle memoried for doing extreme and savage content, I'm a bit concerned about having to relearn things from scratch and let go of my current way of playing. Someone who has played through multiple job reworks, do you have any advice on this? Try not to think about it too much. You've learned it once before, you've developed that muscle memory once before, and that knowledge won't go entirely unwasted. It will allow you to identify certain skills and how they operate in the rotation a little bit more quickly. Besides, if it's a job that you've grown to love and enjoy, there's a good chance you'll be faster picking it up anyway, just for the sake of being interested in it. I find that goes a really long way, and if you're already interested in the visual spectacle, the identity update to it, and as long as you don't mind not having to use Try Disaster to re-up your dots, I don't see any reason why you'd have any particular struggle. So think about it a little bit less and just approach it as the job becomes available and learn from there. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hello. Two things I noticed about the job action trailer that no one seems to be talking about. First is the distressing lack of bears in the trailer, and that depends on what kind of bears you're talking about, because they have a big variety of types of characters in there, and well, they might fall into that category. But I have a feeling you're talking about the more wild kind. More bears needed. But the second is that Bard used Rain of Death and Bloodletter almost back to back, yet no mention is made about Bloodletter, Rain of Death getting charges. Do you think they just didn't mention it, or these two skills no longer share a cooldown? So there are a few possibilities, but without the job action trailer right in front of me, I cannot confirm or deny either of them. The big thing I would like to look for is what was actually being done alongside those. Did they get a proc? Did it reset? Because that would probably be the other answer that you have not considered in what you have presented to me. So really quickly, let me pull up the Bard portion over here, if I could remember where it is, and try to find... Now, it looks like they never go into Mage's Ballad here. So let's see. Army's Paeon. Got Rain of Death right there. They do get a proc, but they also don't use... There's the Bloodletter. You are indeed correct. So what it is very likely has happened here is that there is a single target and an AoE Refulgent Arrow, the skill that they use between Rain of Death and the actual thing. Actually, though, even if that was the case, that wouldn't proc a Bloodletter. So, based on that alone, they either are separated, as you've suggested, or they do indeed have charges for it. And that is actually a really good catch, because I hadn't caught that, they hadn't said anything, and I'll definitely be trying to make sure that that is or isn't the case. So actually, if anything, thank you for pointing that out, because that's going to pique my interest a little bit more as we get more information about Bard later on. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello. Hi. Hope you're having a good one. You too. Got a potential lightning round question for you, keeping in mind gameplay balancing, of course. Do you think that barrier healers could ever get an ability that functions like a tank invuln? That is, an ability with a long cooldown, potential side effects, but prevents your target from dying. This is something I've heavily considered, mostly because, like almost anyone who plays an MMORPG, we think about future class or jobs that could come out, and one of the ones that's been on the top of my list for a long time, but kind of receded when Astro came out, was that of the Time Mage, where they had the ability to store time by casting certain spells and then unleash that in some manner or form. Freezing the time, freezing the tank in place, and thus preventing them from taking any damage while in this stasis, I figured would be basically the equivalent of a healer invuln. Now, if anything, you kind of have to equate it more to something like Benediction, which allows you to completely undo something, but Benediction is normally used alongside tank invuln. So, perhaps instead of what I've suggested, where it freezes them in time and takes away the ability for them to actually take any damage, you have to do a delayed effect kind of thing, where it can absorb the damage and at the end of its duration could actually deal the damage all at once to the tank. This could allow you to do something like a delayed tank invuln, which allows you to cover more than a single mechanic with it. But of course, I'm just spitballing ideas here with balancing and job design that may not actually work out to be all that useful of a tool. To answer the question directly, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable, but not an invuln that just prevents them from dying, something that allows you to control the state at which they take their damage, or to completely mitigate it based on the skills that they're using, the way we see Benediction used with something like Living Dead nowadays. So I think that if we consider it more in those veins and less in just making it like a tank invuln, we might be able to work something out that's a little bit more reasonable. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hope you're doing well today. Same to you. First time asking a question, welcome, and hoping it's not something that's been asked before. Well, let's find that out right here. It's pretty evident that a certain number of people would like the 14 team to retroactively add weapons for newer classes to older ultimates, like the Ukab Gunblade or Uwu Dancer Glaives. I'm wondering in particular, has anyone actually asked Yoshi P or anyone on the 14 team about this? Yes. This has been asked. I'd have to, of course, go looking for the official source or something to tie it back to. Maybe somebody in the comment section of this video will be able to provide that. But it has been asked before if they would consider it. More often it's lumped into would they go back and do old fights, but I know that at least once somebody has definitely asked about adding ultimate weapons for new jobs to older ultimates. It's something that I think will continue to be a question because it is very reasonable that they do that. It's not like Gunbreakers and Dancers never went back and did Ukab or Uwu, even if I quite frankly find that, at least on the Dancer front, definitely not the best range physical to take into level 70 content, whereas Gunbreaker, one of the best jobs to take into level 70 content. So who knows, maybe someone will poke him about it in the upcoming media tour. Maybe I'll poke him about it. I don't know. I haven't really decided exactly what I want to do with that yet, but I am curious about this as well, and I hope they do it because I don't think it makes sense not to do it. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, hope you're doing well. Same to you. I noticed in the Dancer part of the job action trailer that Improv didn't give any esprit or esprit. Do you think they changed it now to do damage in the same way Machinist Flamethrower does? No, I do not. I think they have made it a purely utility-based skill. Currently, the way Improv works is very janky. It's something I've wanted them to update the entire expansion in that it is only at its proper efficiency if you have a party of 8 and they are all standing in it. It never made sense to me why they felt the need to force it to be only that efficient in 8-man content. Granted, it's just not something you really think about in 4-man content because you rarely have these breaks where something like that is super useful, but it was just such a strange decision. I wanted them to decouple the number of people that stand in your improv part from the Esprit generation and do them separately. Now, the alternative to that is to make it a pure healing tool, something that the Dancer brings that is unique, something that is like Collective Unconscious, Wings, etc., etc., and it won't matter how many people you're using it with, you'll feel okay even just tapping it for a second to get that 5 seconds of healing that will snapshot onto the entire party. So I think that's all that's happened. It just doesn't generate Esprit anymore, and it will be strictly for the healing buff, plus the follow-up skill, which looks to be a Dancer equivalent of Medica, if I had to guess. Probably not as strong, but something along those lines. So that's what I think they have actually done with improvisation. Next question, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. How you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Do you think Dragoon will ever get a personal mitigation buff? Monk has Riddle of Earth, Samurai has Third Eye, Ninja has Shadeshift, and Reaper seems to have one now too, but also shares Dragoon's higher defense and HP. Isn't it time Dragoon gets something? Well, they do have something else that the others don't have, but it's just not in the same vein. Instead of it being a proactive tool that you can use to reduce damage, it is a tool that you'll use as part of your rotation that happens to come with an additional benefit, in that of Lance Charge. The other melees pretty much just have Bloodbath and their defensive cooldowns in order to deal with, whatever is defensive. Dragoon, on the other hand, part of their rotation is Lance charging those full thrusts, soon to be fuller thrusts, or whatever they decide to call them, and that will heal you for a significant amount of damage, basically the equivalent to what the shields on the other jobs, except for Riddle of Earth, which at 30% is way OP, would protect you from. Now, do I think that's a fair trade? Not really, because you're not using Life Surge, or what is it called? Lance Charge is the blood for blood. Yeah, Life Surge, isn't that what it's called? I don't even remember. Whatever it is, you're using it just as part of your rotation for the critical hit. It's not something you're using specifically because you need to stay alive. And I think that decouples it kind of from the identity. But I think that might be what they're thinking internally. And at this point, I see no reason not to give Dragoon some sort of personal defense cooldown on top of the fact that they have Second Wind, Feint's getting buffed. And of course, they have this heal that does come out in their rotation and can occasionally line up with raid damage. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Happy. Hope you are doing well. Hope the same for you. The role quest in Shadowbringers was nicely tied to the MSQ. Do you think the role quest in Endwalker will also be tied to the MSQ? Do you think they'll involve any of the main characters at all from the job quest for that role? It's a good question about the characters from the job quests. I really don't know how to feel about that in particular, or not so how to feel about it, but how to predict it, because realistically, I didn't know what the role quests in Shadowbringers were going to be about. I had no idea what to consider, and now going into Endwalker, I'm in pretty much the same boat. I have no idea what to consider with this, but I'd like to believe that it won't just be a bunch of stories that are told individually and have either A, nothing to do with each other, or B, nothing to do with what's happening in the MSQ. There's a lot of room for things, especially when it comes to the Archons of Sharlayan. We could be learning a good bit about some of the previous Archons and things that they accomplished, more in the vein of what Louis Sois was attempting to accomplish. Archons that didn't just want to follow suit and do exactly what the council wanted to do. That's what I was looking for, name-wise. And we could learn a little bit more about them. But there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of places we're going, and we're going to they're going to do some pretty wild things. So we could even learn about heroes from the Loprits or the Moon People or any other Lunarians that might be there. There's tons of possibilities, but they'll definitely be tied to more important stuff in the MSQ. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hope your voice has recovered. Not hello, but I'll take it because it's a nice gesture. Got two quick questions for you. Question number one, do you think job redesign for the expansion has gotten a bit lazy for some jobs? Summoner gets reworked just about every expansion, while other jobs like Dragoon stay relatively unchanged. I'd like to see larger changes that shake up gameplay. So this is kind of just a matter of who you ask, because a lot of people love the job they're playing and don't want a large shakeup for no reason at all. Generally, when they do these shakeups for reworks, it's because of some sort of complaint or demand that was made throughout the entire previous expansion, or in the case of Summoner expansions, that warrants them actually looking at it. Summoner is just a frequent job that gets criticized for MP issues or ghosting issues or identity issues. It's just been a job that's undergone so many criticisms that it receives reworks fairly frequently. But when they nail a job identity and people are loving it, it's about adding to that job identity without ruining what was already there. Realistically, looking at what they've done, Black Mage to me seems like kind of the crown jewel of what they could do to advance a job's identity further without taking away what it actually has been this whole time. I'm really interested to see how this Frostfire mode, or whatever we're going to call it, actually ends up working out for the rotation, and if it really just feels like it's actually built upon the systems, also fixing things like AoE and fixing things like little tiny issues that the jobs actually have, are things that I will take over a complete redesign any day if it's a job that I already enjoy. Moving on to the second question, do you think it would be better to condense AoE combos to one button? For example, Dragoon has a combo that includes 3 buttons. Seems like we're getting a 4th. I thoroughly believe that Doomspike is simply going to change into another button, similar to the way Raiden Thrust does, and I have a feeling that that's going to be their identity with Dragoon for at least one more expansion, is having skills that transform into other skills. Dragoon is less about being a dragon-slaying, lance-wielding, DPS. It's become a lot more in terms of their gameplay identity about long-stringing combos, maintaining buffs and unleashing them in burst windows, while even having transforming combos. It's actually been a pretty interesting pivot from what I would have expected the job would have gone through after all these years. So again, I think it does depend on the job whether or not condensing is actually a good idea. Gunbreaker, I think, was a wise idea, one that I actually predicted they would probably do, was condense the Gnashing Fang combo. But for AoEs, I don't think it is particularly necessary, but also not particularly harmful either way. So I'm for it. And I'm not either for nor against it, but I see no issues with the current system as long as they're making sure all the buttons around it don't get too excessive. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hey Hap, hello. Come va? Greetings from Italy. I thought it said come VA, and I was like, wait, VA for what? Welcome to the channel. Thank you. 2 small questions. 1, why do certain skills share a cooldown between jobs, like Warrior's Upheaval that share a cooldown with certain monk cooldowns? Well, at the beginning, I'm assuming that this was done as a shortcut for job development. They would basically take a baseline of code and then build the individual job skills on top of it, so buttons that have 30-second cooldowns, 45-second cooldowns, 60-second cooldowns are basically built on the same underlying code. So if you use it on one job, you can't just swap to another job and use that same skill. There are times where it makes sense that it works that way and times where it doesn't. I've definitely seen skills that share that kind of internal programming that don't really seem to make a whole lot of sense. But without knowing exactly what the answer to your question is, that would be what I would ascertain based on the way that we've seen the game develop over all this time. 2, considering all they have told us about gill sinks and the experiment they did with the golden mounts, do you think the island sanctuary will be a gill sink? Maybe you have to upgrade it a number of times for something for a high price like Animal Crossing's house. I've definitely considered the possibility and I'm perfectly all for it. But I think they want island sanctuaries to feel like something that you can genuinely work towards. So if they were to make things a gill sink, that might be discouraging for players that aren't very good at making gill. So, in my opinion, they'd have to go with one of two options. They'd have to either allow you to use your gill to advance the island sanctuary faster than other players, or alongside that, they'd have to offer the option for you to do some sort of daily or weekly quest to advance it in place of Gil, which the majority of players would probably opt into. So there are some options for them to do this, but whether or not a player participates in it would probably have to be optional, or at least avoidable, I would say at the very least. So, yeah, we'll see about that, though. I'm definitely looking forward to learning more about Island Sanctuary. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, how are ya? I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. Hope you're doing well. I apologize for the depressing question. Well, let's get into it. But as being you went through the loss of a loved one, I can see how this is going to be depressing, and following the lack of drive that is normally associated with it. I just have to ask, how did you manage? I'm currently in ecstatic that we have been together since Heavensward. I do not want to let them down, and while I enjoyed playing with them, I know my performance has suffered due to the sudden loss of my father. I apologize for your loss. Like you said, I know well enough what that's all like. I know I'm slacking, I'm missing my timings, failing mechanics. In truth, I have no business failing. It's been over a month, and generally the passion and drive I've had for everything left in the game and out. Just, I guess generally, how did you overcome it? I get everyone is different, but I'm at a loss and I'm stuck, and I wish to play with my friends, but I do not want to hold them back. So, I've got a couple of things to say. First and foremost, I'm not an expert in any way of dealing with grief management. You should seek out professional help, more so than the help of a complete stranger on the internet who has no qualifications, even if they've been through a similar thing. So what I'm going to tell you is my experience with it. It has no bearing on whether or not it will be something that is successful for you, and I do not want this to come off as advice that you should unanimously follow in the case of doing what I did. Essentially, I knew my life had to go on. That was it. There was really nothing fancy about it, because the last thing I wanted to do was take what I had been given, the life I had been given, and squander it away by not enjoying things, by not spending time with my friends, by not doing what I do as a passion. And that drive alone is really what pushed me through it. Now, not everyone has the same life circumstances. Again, why I can't stress enough that actual counseling for grieving is way more important than what I'm telling you right here. But knowing that someone would want me to enjoy my life, to enjoy the things that I've always enjoyed when they were around, is the thing that gets me going, because I wouldn't want them to be looking down at me and be upset that thinking that they may have caused me to end up this way just because they're not there anymore. So, not really, again, sound advice. Please definitely seek out something more professional to actually deal with what's going on inside of you, because I can't imagine that the experience I've had and how I've managed to go through it is going to work for everyone. And not to mention that it's not like I don't go through phases where that doesn't work. You know, sometimes that time of year comes around where it's like those emotions just kind of flood back to you without you even thinking about it. Or a time of year that was once special to you, same exact thing. So it's still not universal, no matter what. So you're going to have to tackle this in your own way, but at the very least, thinking about it in the most positive manner possible about how you can proceed with your life, that was what worked for me. And I would hope that it would work for you, but don't let this advice be the last advice that you take in this regard. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Good day to you, Mr. Happy. Hello to you as well. I wanted to know, what is your favorite thing to cook? I'm a big fan of sausage and rice. It's so simple just to take a spicy Italian sausage, break it up, and then cook it alongside some onions, some bell peppers, some garlic, and just toss it in a pan, maybe reduce it down, get the rice in there, and then cook it in like a broth of some kind, like a chicken broth or a beef broth or something. Oh, that's so good. But I think steak has got to be the tippy top. I mean, there's just nothing quite like. I don't reverse sear. I do it the old-fashioned way. Sear it on both sides, rest it on a bunch of aromatics, and then stick it in the oven for 8 to 10 minutes, depending on the thickness of the steak. Get a nice medium rare, and then just serve it alongside some mashed potatoes, some asparagus, or some Brussels sprouts, or something like that. Oh, you just can't go wrong. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, hi. Just curious, based off the fact that Sage appears to have a bit more complicated DPS components than most healers seem to have currently, do you expect that they will have more small changes in line for the other healers to make moment-to-moment gameplay more exciting and help serve as a teaching tool for early healers to learn that DPS is part of their job without being explicitly told? I will say that the Hall of the Novice does explicitly tell you this, but nobody reads, so what can I do? Whether that be some form of healer DPS rotation, some procs that help make DPSing more integrated to the idea of being a healer, or something else entirely. This is always my biggest grievance. If I'm going to spend time DPSing instead of healing, I want it to at least be somewhat interesting and ideally somewhat integrated into my primary role. Also, make sure you rest, man. You shouldn't be working yourself to the grave for our benefit, even given expansion news coming. Thank you for your concern, but like you can see, I bounce back every time. So I've actually been having this discussion on my live stream, speaking of overworking myself, because I do think something along these lines is probably coming. Now, do I think it is universal, so much so that it will feel homogenized between all of the healers? No. I think other aspects of the healers are going to be homogenized, but only the aspects they've told us about, being able to provide a single target buff to somebody, and perhaps maybe that triggers a counterattack on all of them. We see Sage basically on their buffed single target heal appears to have a counterattack that gives them a stack of Adder's Sting. Now that's unrelated to the skill they said would be that single target buff, which I'm expecting to be damage reduction based on the translated Sage tooltips we have seen from the live letter itself. But I'd have to imagine that there's some degree of involvement. The lily pad that we see from the white mage does appear to either be upon taking damage or dealing damage. It's hard to tell, but it could also just be proccing every so often. We have barely seen anything of Scholar whatsoever, and they said most of the changes would come to the fairy itself. So I'm curious to see how that actually ends up panning out. Not to mention they at least always had energy drain to consider versus using their ether for other things, so I guess that is also a possibility. And then with Astra, we at least see the Star Shower, which appears to also be an offensive tool, but how involved that actually is a big question mark. So I think everyone has similar questions to you about the healers, and we just won't know until that Mediator embargo actually lifts sometime in mid-October. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, 2.0 watcher, first time asker. Welcome. Most questions I have, someone else beats me too. So have a bonus of your dream implementation of Puppet Master. Oh, trust me, the gears are always turning. I imagined like one of them could be the Puppet Master. You're giving the puppet all the commands, but then when it overheats, instead of it becoming worthless, it just disassembles and reassembles on your body, and you have to recharge it with your own ether by fighting with your own puppet attached to you. And then it exits, reforms, and you continue where you left off. With them announcing that Summoner only kept its res by the skin of its teeth, do you think it would be better to rework DPS revives into something similar to Blue Mage's Angel Whisper on a longer cooldown? That way it's still there, but it's more in line with them being a DPS class and much more for severe emergencies. It also forces healers to res more in content such as Alliance raids instead of stubbornly green DPSing and expecting someone else to do it for them. So, I am someone who has had the opinion for some time now that combat reses are too powerful in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I will admit that comes ignoring the fact that battle reses are range anywhere from thank God we were able to save this run to it doesn't matter, we're going to die to the next mechanic because of that anyway. So, I guess it really depends on the content you're actually in. But I wouldn't be opposed to them getting a cooldown of Angel Whisper at the exchange of the healer res costing less MP. I do think that the reason the res is 3,000 MP across the board right now is because it is available on two of the DPS jobs, and if you're going to take it away from them and the healers are going to be bearing that burden, I think it's only fair to make sure that it doesn't absolutely annihilate their MP if they're forced to do it. I do think it is also kind of a unique trait that Red Mage is able to do these chain reses because it doesn't come with no downside. The MP, after a couple of raises on Red Mage, starts to render you unable to even perform your main role in the first place. So a group has to pretty consciously make the decision to make a Red Mage do this, and it has to be very much something that will guarantee success, or the Red Mage is going to be rendered so powerless that you lose just too much in the process regardless. And I think that's the important thing to consider with battle reses that come out of Red Mage and even Summoner, that it is not a zero-sum benefit or a zero loss benefit. There is something that is lost, especially if you have to do it too frequently. So as much as I'm not a fan of the overabundance of battle reses that are available in Final Fantasy XIV, I do think there are enough of drawbacks to warrant not changing it, and that if they were to change it as you've suggested, that they would have to adjust the healer reses to be in line with not absolutely griefing them. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hope all is well. First time askers with a bonus of DMing me level 90 warrior details before the embargo lifts. Let me tell you what you're not getting. That. Has it been said or mentioned anywhere that it would, if you would need to have the Shadowbringers role quest and the subsequent AD quest to start the job role quest in Endwalker? No, that would not be fun because you would then be very screwed out of doing the future ones. They're unrelated quest lines, the two of them. They have actually stated that this has no bearing on the Shadowbringers ones. And you know what makes that abundantly apparent, even if they hadn't already stated that? The fact that there's a whole other role that's going to be available as a role quest in Endwalker. So you don't have to worry about any of that. You're just going to do the Endwalker ones as they are needed. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday Q&A hashtag. Well, he tried to hashtag Q&A, but the hashtag doesn't like that, the ampersand, so apologies. Hey, Haps, hope you're doing all right. I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Long-time watcher, many times asker, but do you think the Unreal mount, the Construct 6S, will go up in price if the Unreal Trials will no longer be available, or will they make it available through gold certs as well and remain around 10-ish mil? What is your opinion on the whole idea of Unreal Tries and its reward system? What rewards should people prioritize if they decide to do? Well, Unreals will not be available for some time. During all of 6.0 until 6.1, we will not have Unreal Trials in the game, which means that if you don't have the rewards before 6.0, you'll be waiting 4 or so months before you actually can start getting them again. Now, during that time, anyone who does have leaves saved, depending on how many characters they've saved, because we know people are crazy with that, they will be able to probably sell them for an increased price. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see them get added to gold certs, but there's no guarantee of that at the moment. I personally am hoarding my leaves in order to buy the first new thing that comes out in 6.1 and onward, assuming they don't do any shenanigans like taking away our leaves or doing anything of that caliber, I suppose. So, with that in mind, I've really enjoyed Unreal. I've done it every week since it came out, and I don't plan to let that stop before Endwalker itself comes out, and then after they've returned in 6.1. Now, the rewards, I think, are kind of up in the air how they've been doing. I think that the buffed amount of leaves that we get now is far more reasonable, and thus makes it a little bit more attractive of an option. But I still think we need multiple Unreal Trials available at a time, or at the very least alternating them between weeks. So that way, one week could be this Unreal Trial, this one could be another one. So hopefully in 6.1 and all the way through 6.5, instead of just having one trial that is there for 4 months, add it to the list of trials that's available, make it the one that's available week 1, and then allow them to rotate so that way we get some variety throughout the expansion week after week with the Unreal Trial that is available. Another part to that questioning, I just realized there was way more. My motivation? Money. It's also a lot of fun. I just genuinely enjoy doing them. And for someone who wants to prog uwu through the party finder, somebody better bring auto markers. I don't like auto markers. I don't like that it exists. I think it's lazy. But when you're doing pugs, you need every advantage you could get. So make sure someone has auto markers, and other than that, just do your research, and you should be fine. All right, and I think that's the last question I'm going to take prior to the lightning round. Some of the remaining questions are answered in comments, for example. Somebody asking about, for example, Baldessian Arsenal having story locked behind it. BA is so easy. Don't let what it actually is fool you into thinking that it's actually a difficult thing to achieve. You can honestly get hard carried through BA by just following the leader and doing what they say, as long as you don't die on that final boss or get rezzed even in time before you are sucked out of the arena. So I don't think it's a problem at all. Quite frankly, I found the story bits after Baldessian Arsenal a little lazy, because I don't want to say too much about it. I don't want to say too much about why I think it's lazy, because it's going to spoil what the actual ending is, but that's just how I feel about it. Somebody was asking about why people think Scholar's a dead job. It's because it's not flashy, cool, and new. This happens every expansion when something gets added. People wonder how the other jobs could even compete in being interesting or fun. 70% of people playing the role just say, oh, I'm going to main this from now. And then they play it and they realize they don't actually like it. Now, that's not to say that Scholar is guaranteed to release in some sort of set manner that makes it completely acceptable from a performance standpoint, but that doesn't mean that's going to turn out bad either. I actually have some pretty high hopes for Scholar, and I've seen some people that are looking at the translated Sage tooltips and even saying that potency alone right now doesn't look like Sage has too much of an advantage. It just has a wider array of achieving the same exact things. But we need to see all of the other healer changes before we make any sort of major conclusion about the state of the jobs. And even then, by 6.05 or 6.1, it'll probably be closer to in line with each other anyway. What else did we have here? Someone started asking a question about the trust system, but then it just kind of ends without asking a question. They said that trust, they want to level DPS, and they want to use trusts for it because the DPS have bad Q times, but then the question just ends, so I'm not really sure what happened there. People asking stuff about specifics of the media tour. I won't be answering any of those questions. You're just going to have to wait like everybody else does. So any of the questions that are involved in that, outside of me potentially addressing, oh, maybe I can bring this up during the media tour, that's about the extent that you're ever going to get from me when it comes to that stuff. Because, you know, embargo, pretty important. Don't want them taking me off a list of any kind, because I would like to continue to be able to provide you content on that front. There was somebody asking about the fate of a couple of characters based on the plot of Final Fantasy IV, and let's just say I've made this prediction already, and I think that they'll be all right, but there's gonna be some tears, I think, when it comes to some of the different fates of characters in Endwalker. Somebody asked if Bojo is going to be updated or added to the challenge log. Probably not. There's no reason not to. I just don't think it will. That's really all it is. And I have played Xenoblade. I've played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I never want to have to play it again. I actually do want to play Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and I do have it, but I haven't jumped at the bit to play it after playing 2. So one day, I'll form those opinions separately. Let's see, what else do we got? Got that with the thing. Someone asking about Huton and Ninja. Quite frankly, I don't know. My answer to that question after reading it was going to be, I don't know. Kidney stones for you, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is going to be, how it's going to work, why it's going to work the way that I don't know. I don't know. Someone confirming that Savage will unlock on the 21st of December. They told us that outright months ago, that it would be the 21st of December. So yes, to answer that question. What else was there? Dragoon personal mitigation buff, improv question. You're going to go back to your first Mondays with Mr. Happy and re-answer those questions? Probably not much of my interest wheelhouse personally, but I get what the interest is for you in particular. And then there's something about the architecture that is available in some areas of the game and compared to the architecture we see on the moon. All I have to say about that without saying anything in particular is Allagans and Asians did everything. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. That's to you, Patrick Bird, to see, so you know that I did indeed see your answer. Am I excited for the new jobs coming out shortly? Yeah. And somebody asking if they'll add a 5th caster in 7.0. Don't call Blue Mage the 4th caster. Don't do that. Maybe. I don't know why I'm not super confident in a caster in 7.0. I don't know why. I'm just not. But also, 4th caster, not 5th caster. Somebody asking if we'll get the Unending Journey JP book in NA. Who knows? There's no way for me to know that, so maybe. Somebody asked me what I think about the opinions for Dragon Song War, what the phases will be. We already know what the first phase is. We already know that it's the 3 bosses from the vault fighting on specifically the airstrip. Not even at the Fault's Vinyl Dungeon Room. It's actually at the airstrip right before a certain scene takes place. I made a tweet about that not too long ago. I think it'll go from that into Thornton, into Nidhogg/Nidstinian, into Thornton becoming a Dragon Knight, and we get the Dragon Song Knights of the round. There you go. I do think Hraesvelgr will play a role as well, but mostly buffing us with his eyes. I think that's going to be the woke style mechanic for that, where we have to empower ourselves by being hit by certain attacks that will give us Hraesvelgr's energy. That's my guess, and I'm hoping it comes true. Somebody asking about the monsters from the Emptiness in Final Fantasy XI appearing in the job action trailer. There's nothing really to think about it. There's no relevance to that. They've borrowed tons of models from Final Fantasy XI in the past. We have monsters from Sea. It has no relevance. They're just sea creatures that fit the aesthetic, and I have a feeling that's pretty much going to be the same with this. There'll be Terminus beasts or something that is relative to Zodiark itself, like just enemies that make sense aesthetically to be in proximity to those things. And then let's see what else. Was there anything else? That's the healer invuln thing, and playing for a year and a half. Sage heals, it does its damage, and then question this week is about Monk. Oh, wow. I actually just straight up didn't see this question, so it's a good thing I went back through. Let's see. Is there any alternative to follow perfect balance where it leaves you formless without hurting your DPS too much? One of the reasons why I'm looking forward to Endwalker Monk. I guess I should read the whole thing. The question is this week. Having to switch up when I use Twin Sanction True Strike every perfect balance cycle makes it hard for me to adjust because I have a lot of muscle memory from the job. I mean, it's going to be about adjusting to new muscle memory. That is going to be a thing. The way I've set up some of my predicted openers, you will actually change position very infrequently during the opener until a certain part where it actually might get a little bit chaotic. But That being said, is there any alternative follow Perfect Balance wherein it leaves you formless? But Perfect Balance does not leave you formless. After Perfect Balance, in the live letter, you do actually have change form. So your first GCD after PB will actually be one that allows you... Oh, I'm sorry. After you use your Masterful Blitz, specifically. Okay, but you're wondering, can we use the GCD before we Blitz just to make sure that we have something like Twin Snakes? I don't think that's the case. I think you're always going to want to be blitzing after you actually use Perfect Balance. I'm sure some big brain monk is going to figure out a method with which what you've just said makes a lot of sense. But as you've stated, you would only have to be following up with a formless Dragon Kick or a formless Boot Shine. So the only thing that makes sense is to have a Leaden Fist going into a Boot Shine, but it's not even going to be a crit, so it's kind of a waste of that Leaden Fist. But there might be some big brain monk that figures something out. I expect that you will almost always be immediately going into a Blitz to get that change form effect after, to then do something after that. There's the tank gap closer. Somebody just saying to enjoy Arise. I have been. I've really enjoyed Arise thus far. I'm not done with it, but I have really enjoyed it thus far. And with that, I think that covers all of the major questions here. Some I think might be left that were answered via replies, but I think I can call it a wrap for this video. So thank you everyone for watching this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. If you have a question, put it in the comment section of the video below, and hopefully I won't miss it like I almost missed that monk question going into next week. Thank you again to our sponsors over on Patreon, our Patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, and Kurenai Oni, and all of you for just tuning in general. Be on the lookout for a bunch of videos in the coming weeks, not Mediator related, and then eventually Mediator related, but we got some stuff planned to keep the channel a little bit busy before that time actually comes. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one, and until then, take care.